However, in mid-December, the Red Army's advance came to a halt. It was not possible to break through the Mannerheim Line on the Karelian Isthmus or to bypass it from the north. Two Soviet divisions and a tank brigade, which were going around the Finnish fortifications, were surrounded and defeated. The Finns successfully used bottles with an incendiary mixture, which they called the Molotov cocktail, against Soviet tanks. Only in February 1940 did the Soviet Union resume its offensive by storming the Mannerheim Line. As a result of fierce fighting, it was possible to break through it near the village of Suma. Meanwhile, Britain and France had already sent the first echelon of an expeditionary corps of about 16,000 soldiers, so Stalin decided to abandon the goal of planting the communist Kuusinen in the capital. Instead, he agreed to negotiate peace with the legitimate Finnish government. Prolonging the war will allow the French and Swedes to send reinforcements, and instead of a war with one state, we will get involved in a war with a coalition, Stalin said on March 10, 1940. For his part, Mannerheim advised his government officials to seek peace while the Finnish army was not yet defeated and ready to fight back. A Finnish delegation arrived in Moscow. Now, the USSR demanded a territory 13 times larger than that agreed upon in the negotiations in October 1939, including the city of Vibeke. The Finns agreed to this, and a peace treaty was signed on March 12, 1940. However, this was not enough for the Soviet Union. Already after the signing of the agreement, Soviet leaders found out that near the new border, in the village of Iennesso, there was a large pulp and paper factory. Pulp, among other things, is important for gunpowder production, and the USSR was then building up its armaments. As a result, the Red Army invaded the town. The Soviet Union annexed it along with the factory. Almost the entire local population of about 400,000 people left the occupied lands. Most of the territories acquired in the war were annexed to the newly created Karelo-Finnish Soviet Socialist Republic within the USSR. It was headed by the same motto, Kuusinen, until its liquidation in 1956. Finland, realizing the danger posed by the USSR, began to establish cooperation with Germany in the second half of 1940. The appearance of German troops on Finnish territory for a while forced Stalin to restrain his desire to attack again. But after the war between Germany and the USSR began, Soviet aviation launched massive strikes on Finnish territory. This marked the beginning of a new Soviet-Finnish conflict. For half a year, the Finns regained the lost territories and reached a convenient line for defense, and then avoided active hostilities. In particular, they categorically refused to help the Germans capture Leningrad and also sabotaged the operation that would have cut the Murmansk Railway, one of the important Lend-Lease routes. Until 1943, the Finns tried their best to be friends with the Germans and, if possible, not to quarrel with the British and Americans. In the conditions of World War II, it was very difficult to hold such a balance, but in the end it brought a positive result. When in the summer of 1944, the Soviet Army organized a series of powerful offensives against Finland, Roosevelt and Churchill managed to convince Stalin to abandon the march on Helsinki and make peace. Then Finland was not only forced to make new concessions, including territorial ones, but also to hold a show trial of the former president and government officials who had headed the state from 1941 to 1944. Under the agreement with the USSR, Finland undertook to maintain neutrality and recognize the special strategic interests of the Union. In the West, this policy of appeasing its large neighbor was criticized and contemptuously called Finlandization. In response to criticism, long-term Finnish President Urho Kekkonen noted that Finland prefers to be a bridge between the West and the East rather than a wall. And little has changed here, even after the collapse of the USSR. But Russian aggression against Ukraine, among other things, led to Helsinki finally throwing off the shackles and the country joining NATO. Although it did not regain the lost territories,